right, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this latest bootcamp series, Cracking the Code to Successful Sales, Part 3. If you haven't attended any of my boot camps in the past, my name is Stephanie Hammond. I am the head nerd that's responsible for all things sales and marketing related. I've had a lot of different roles at Enable during my tenure, with my last role being a principal account manager for our super elite partners. So you can see my contact information there on the screen, my email address, a QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn, because if you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, and we should be linked together. So looking at, kind of the core objectives that we're going to be covering off in today's session. This session is about a couple of hours in length. We'll take a break about halfway through for about 5 minutes to kind of stretch our legs and refill a coffee. But in today's session, we're going to talk about how do you take the assessment findings to create and populate a compelling proposal. And we're going to review some of the most common components that make up a great MSP sales proposal, because this is part 3 of my 3-part bootcamp series. So if you happen to miss part 1 and 2, there might be some things that I'm referring to that I won't be reviewing in today's session, but you can go back into Enable You, look at part 1, look at part 2 to maybe get brought up to speed. Part 1 was all around discovering questions, qualification criteria, because the whole purpose of this 3-part sales series was the idea that your marketing worked. You now have someone that wants to speak with you and wants to meet with you. So what do you do then? So how do you take that prospect who now wants to speak with you, and how do you move them through the sales process from a lead so that they become a new signed closed deal in the end? So part 1 was all around qualification, that discovery process. What questions do I ask to make sure that there's a good fit between my MSP and the prospect, with the goal of that first meeting to get agreement to move forward with an assessment stage. So you're doing a business workflow assessment, and you're also doing a cybersecurity assessment. So what we want to do today is, from those assessment findings that you did in stage 2, is how do you take that material, how do you take that data to create and populate a compelling proposal, and we'll review some of those components. We're also going to review the negotiation process and the strategy that you can use to help prevent, if you have some deals that are stalling, how to keep them moving forward so they do become a signed closed deal in the end. We're going to review a few tips on what to do when you're presenting your proposal. Then we're going to review and move into objection handling, review some tips there on how to best respond back to your prospects' most common objections. And then lastly, we're going to review the importance of conducting what I call a win-loss analysis on your deals, because the idea is that you can't measure the success of your sales process, and you won't know really where to make any tweaks or improvements if you aren't speaking to your customers and your prospects at the conclusion of it all. So we're going to go through what that win-loss analysis looks like and how you can use it to continually improve your close ratios. So looking at the components of what a good sales proposal looks like. I am a firm believer that every MSP should be using a sales proposal as part of their sales process. I still come across MSPs who aren't really in the habit of using a sales proposal, but I do think it's very important. And the reason being is that the managed services sales process is considered a complex sales process, and all complex sales process do require some sort of proposal, because when you look at what you're offering to your prospects, a business owner, they're considering more than just your price when they're deciding to partner with the new MSP. We're going on the assumption that, whoever you're talking with currently, they already have an MSP. MSP services have been around for the better part of 20 years. So most businesses today do have an MSP that they're working with. And now your challenge is how do you basically steal that business? How do you convince a prospect to leave who they're using today and come over to yourself? And a sales proposal, along with, kind of this whole 3-part sales series that we're talking about, is going to help with that. Because when you look at a sales proposal, the proposal, kind of puts that business owner's requirements, their priorities into context so that it favors your services. And it's used as an education piece as well, to educate the business owner around the capabilities of your MSP and how you can help address their needs. So because of that point alone, I really do feel that every MSP should be using a business proposal at this stage. And so looking at what do you include in that sales proposal, and that's what we're going to refer or talk about in kind of this first section. I do have a sample proposal document that hopefully everybody sees in the handout section. Feel free to download a copy of that. There's also a sample PowerPoint presentation as well if you're looking for something a little bit on the professional side that you want to deliver during that meeting. But in kind of building out this boot camp last year, I had a lot of very kind MSPs who submitted their sales proposals to me just to kind of get an idea of what they're including in it and get a feel of what they're using with their own customers. And unfortunately, many of the sales proposals that I did receive, I didn't use them as examples because the big reason was I found most of them were far too technical. They were littered with lots of graphs and charts and metrics and percentages. And if I was putting myself in the shoes of a non-technical business owner that was attempting to read through, these different proposals, and I was trying to use them to help me make a decision around whether I was going to switch MSP providers or not, I found them very underwhelming and actually confusing. Because thinking about, again, who you are working with from a traditional managed services standpoint, you're pretty much dealing with non-technical business owners. And so they don't have that technical expertise to understand, what the different metrics mean, what the different charts mean, what the different percentages mean. And, how is that going to be relevant to their business? Why should they care about all of those metrics and all of those percentages? Because that doesn't really convey to me as a non-technical business owner how that's going to help resolve a lot of the struggles and the problems I might be experiencing with my existing MSP. So we're going to go through the 8 components that make up any good sales proposal. And again, I have a template there for everyone to refer to. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly review what a sales proposal isn't. So 2 big points here. Your sales proposal is not a menu of all the services that you offer. When we're targeting the traditional managed services client, they don't have anybody internal that's looking after their IT. So they're relying on you as the MSP to be their outsourced IT department. So when we're targeting those types of clients, we don't sell in an a la carte manner. We don't sell in a choose your own set of services type of fashion. That is pretty much reserved for the co-managed type of client where you're not responsible for the care protection of their network because there's an internal IT department or an internal IT person that's looking after that for them. So from a co-managed perspective, you're just stepping in to kind of offer your support in one area where maybe the IT director needs it. So I'm talking about this today from the traditional managed services standpoint, which for the most part, most MSPs are still targeting. So your sales proposal is not a menu, it's not an a la carte set of services, and I also believe you don't offer choices. If you offer choices in your proposal, I think you're going to confuse your prospect with too many options, and you're going to undermine, kind of the sales efforts that we've been building up over the course of these last 3 stages. Because a lot of times, this is supposed to be an education piece with your proposal, and if you're offering different choices, a lot of the times the prospect is going to just go with the cheapest option without really understanding what the differences are between the different options. They're going to allow their wallet to dictate what level they go with, and that's not what we want. We want to propose to them the solution that's going to properly protect and secure their employees and their network. So the question did come up this morning in this morning's section about, my feelings on the good, better, best when it comes to program design. Back in the day, this was also the silver, gold, platinum, the precious metals. I don't personally believe in the precious metals. I don't believe in the good, better, best. If you have listened to my bootcamp series on how do you build, price, market, sell security programs, you will see that I only talk about 2 programs, and I don't even refer them as good and better or better and best, because it really depends on who you are targeting. So if you are targeting any organization that happens to fall underneath any sort of compliancy standards. So if we're talking with anybody in the financial industry, healthcare industry, legal industry, education, government, then there's really only one program you should be offering them, and that is the Advanced Security Package. Because when it comes to compliance and demonstrating and adhering to compliance, those types of customers don't have a choice. They don't have a choice whether they can be compliant or not. So you need to present a program that has that SOC, SIM, compliance, the log monitoring, auditing, all in that. If you're dealing with clients that maybe they're smaller, they don't really have any compliancy standards that they have to adhere to. Now, it's probably make an argument that everybody has compliancy when you look at PCI, but again, if you have a smaller client, very minimal data collection that they're doing, revenues aren't very large, the breach impact wouldn't be that high, the risk isn't that high, then maybe you could downgrade them into what I was calling the Essential Security Program, which really covers the basics from a security standpoint. Still will have a heightened risk there because you're not putting all the monitoring and detection services in place. But if you have a client that's break, fix, time material, trying to get them into that advanced program at $250 per user per month might be a little bit of a stretch, might be a little bit of an ordeal. So then you can back them into that essential as kind of your baseline, minimum viable program. So that was the question that came up today when I talked about don't offer choices. They wanted my opinion on the good, better, best. So just in case anybody was maybe thinking that same question, I thought I'd kind of beat you to it if that was going to be a question that came up. So let's talk about the 8 different components of a quality sales proposal. We'll spend a few moments going through each of those. But a pro tip that I want to give, and I did talk about this in my first 2 boot camps of this series, is as you're putting your proposal together, try to insert any relevant quotes that you've been able to capture from previous conversations that you've had with your prospect about their business and what they're looking to achieve with their business. Because if you are able to kind of take some of their quotes that have come up through your different conversations over the last couple of years or a couple of weeks, this is going to help you create a more meaningful and personal proposal document for them. And it's going to help keep the proposal succinct and really focused on the prospect's goals, their objectives, and what their primary concerns are. Because if you go and, through the proposal with them and going through the different sections, and they can kind of see their own quotes kind of sprinkled throughout it, you're conveying that you truly understand and grasp their business objectives and what their business requirements are. Unfortunately, we are salespeople. Our prospects know that we're salespeople. We're trying to win a sale. But if they see their own quotes, their own sentiments in the proposal document that you're going through with them, they may not necessarily agree with what you have to say, but they're not going to disagree with themselves and some of these sentiments that they expressed with you. So it's really about kind of using their own words against them, but using them in a way to help strengthen your position and provide that greater emphasis that you are, the more mature, the more professional MSP that they should be working with. So going through each section, part 1 is really the executive summary. Your executive summary, we all know what that is, right? It's a short summary of what is contained within the sales proposal document. This is where you want to be clear about your intentions of wanting to partner with them, for this long-lasting relationship. So it's just kind of an outline as to what they can expect to read in the actual proposal. Part 2, this is all about outlining their business goals, their objectives, their priorities, and the desired outcomes. And this is the section where we're basically recapping and reviewing the prospect's goals, their objectives, the priorities, the desired outcomes. This was all information and data that you were able to collect in the qualification and the assessment stages from earlier. So this is one of those sections where it would be fantastic if you can go and insert, any relevant quotes or sentiments that the prospect has expressed to you in those previous conversations to continually remind them as to what they have communicated to you. Because again, when decision makers see their own direct quotes in the proposal, when they see their own words being used, it makes that proposal personal to them. And again, you're coming across that you're actually listening and you understand what they need. Part 3 is all around, issue identification. It's the review of those, basically what the present day situation is, what the current issues are that have been communicated to you or identified via your assessment process. So in this section, this is where we're going to review, those challenges, those struggles that the prospect has communicated to you that they're currently facing. And so in other words, these are the problems that they're looking to get solved. And so here you do want to show prospects that you do understand their predicament, that you understand the issues that they're currently trying to deal with. You do want to include some type of problem statement in your proposal, because again, it's going to be difficult for prospects to really listen to your recommendations or take your advice if they don't think you fully understand the problems that your solutions are going to be able to address. So you want to outline in this section, why the prospect, why they're still in this situation, given they probably have another MSP they're working with, and you want to, maybe bring to light maybe other solutions or ideas that were brought to the table by the other MSP to try and help solve these current struggles, but maybe they weren't implemented or fully completed for whatever reason by that incumbent MSP, so they are still problems for this organization. And the idea with this section is it's meant to proactively head off, some of those common objections that you're likely going to hear from the decision maker, especially once you show them the pricing around, why do we need this? Why do we need this now? And why can we not just ask our existing MSP provider to do this for us? Because these are going to be questions that you're going to get asked anyways, or these are the types of objections that you're going to get maybe commented back to you. So this section is also added to help you anticipate those questions and then be ready and prepared to answer them. And the best part is, again, we're going to be using the prospect's very own words to populate this section and address their concerns. Because again, in part 1 and part 2 of the MSP Sales Process Bootcamp series, as you are having your discovery conversation, as you are conducting your business workflow analysis, during those boot camps, I reviewed the types of questions that you would want to ask, kind of the flow of the questions that you'd want to ask. We talked about the BANT and the GPCT frameworks, and it's really the answers to those questions that we reviewed that you're going to use to kind of help tackle and address the kind of objections head on, like, what are the biggest challenges being faced by your team that's preventing you from, reaching your goals? Are these urgent issues for you? Why are you considering switching MSP providers? Are there some things that you're not currently happy about? What's prompting you to do something about this now? We want to find out what's changed. You've been experiencing these problems for a while. Why do we need to, why are we talking basically? And then what happens if you decide not to switch MSP providers, but to stay with your existing MSP? So these are questions you want to get answered, but you would have already asked these questions in earlier discussions. So you should already have these answers. And then all we need to do for this part of the proposal document is to list those questions out and then provide the answers that the prospects themselves already gave you in previous conversations a few weeks ago. And again, the greatest part about incorporating a section like this into the proposal document is it also helps to prevent the sales process from stalling out, especially if the prospect decides after all this time to just do nothing and just to kind of keep with the status quo. With a section like this is what helps to create that urgency and will help propel that sale forward and increase the probability of you actually making the sale and winning the client. So again, just a screenshot from the template that you can download, really about, why do we need to act and why do we need to act now? And, what happens if we just get the existing MSP to do, kind of what you're recommending. Part 4, solution overview. And so in this step, this is where you present your best solution and your recommendations, and then detail how it aligns with the prospect's business objectives as quoted in part 2, the business objectives section. Again, we're not including multiple options here. We're not giving them a choice between better and best or silver or gold. You are including the program that makes both sense for the person or the business that you are targeting. And so not only in this section do we want to focus on what your best solution is, but we also want to highlight in a positive way the business impact that your services are going to have on their business, you know, meaning talking about how your solution is going to help make them more productive, help make them more efficient, help make them more secure and safer, and how you're going to help make them more competitive and profitable in the end. And I really look at this as, you know, this is what business owners really care about. You know, all those metrics, all those percentages, all those charts and graphs. Your job as the MSP is to be the translator of that information. You know, you understand what that information means, but what you need to do in your business proposal is translate in layman's terms what you're seeing and how there's going to be that impact on the organization, and then talk about how you're going to be able to you know, remediate or mitigate any of the risks that you're seeing. So if you feel that, you know, full technical or service descriptions need to be included, I don't think they need to be included in this section, but I would maybe tuck it into the back, like maybe appendices section, and put it there if for some reason you need to bring them out. But really, it's always keeping in mind who you are speaking with and who your audience is. We're dealing with non-technical business buyers who are more interested in how you're going to resolve their critical business challenges, and not really what you're going to do to try and fix that. So we want to make sure that as we're communicating, avoiding those technical terms, avoiding that IT jargon, avoiding, again, charts, graphs, percentages, because to a regular business person, that's not going to mean anything to me. But if you feel that they're needed, that you need to refer back to them, then just tuck them in at the end at the appendices side. Part 5, this is where we outline the scope, the schedule, and the pricing. And this is where we outline, you know, what's going to be included in the program, what they're going to get, and what this is all going to cost them. Now, I just came back from a conference last week where I was giving a main stage. The main stage was supposed to be on how do you build a cybersecurity practice, but they only gave me 30 minutes. So I'm not going to talk about how to build a cybersecurity practice in 30 minutes. What I ended up doing is kind of flipping it and talking about what not to do when building a cybersecurity practice. And I referenced 3 court cases that are going on at the moment where there's 3 respective MSPs who are being sued by their customers because their customers got breached, and they're now looking to blame their MSP, and they're taking them to court. We went, you know, in my talk, I went through 7, 8 different takeaways, 7 key lessons from those court cases. And one of the biggest takeaways from the court cases that probably could have prevented all 3 court cases is there was no proper agreement in place. And if there was an agreement, details were sparse in terms of what the prospect was paying for. There was no schedule, there's no scope of services outlining what's in scope, what's out of scope, that would have cleared a lot of assumptions between the MSP and the client. So this is the part of the proposal where you do outline in great detail what the prospect is going to get, when they're going to get it, and what it's going to cost them. Now, if you did attend my Building Security Programs Bootcamp series, this slide would look familiar. This is basically outlining what an advanced cybersecurity program would look like, out detailing what's in scope, what's out of scope. And so if this is the program that you are recommending to your customer in this particular case, because they do fall under some sort of set of compliance standards, banking, financial, healthcare, then this would be the program that you would be positioning. And so you would put in the details of the program so the prospect is fully aware of what they're getting and what they're paying for. And then when it does come to pricing, this is where you really do want to be open, clear, specific in terms of what is included and what is not included, right? Because you don't want to make the next big court case. So your proposal should outline what's in scope, what services you're going to provide, what's out of scope, and would therefore be billable, because again, we want to eliminate as much of the gray area as we can when it comes to invoicing and expected costs. Also work to try and keep all the pricing information together in the same place in the proposal. If it's scattered, and I did see this in some, if it's scattered all throughout your proposal document, prospects may overlook some of the pricing details, and then they might become frustrated and upset, and it might make you appear that you're not being fully transparent with your costs, which can result in being a big deterrent to actually winning over the client. So dedicate kind of a function or a portion of your proposal template to dealing with all of the pricing information so that you don't inadvertently blindside your customer later on. And you know, when it comes to pricing, I know this really trips up a lot of MSPs, but you know, price really only represents 9% of the total B2B purchasing decision. And this comes from a good book I read, Joe Moroni's Smart Sales Method. So it really shouldn't be something that's avoided or put off or kind of try to sweep it under the table, right? You know, it's sales. When you're dealing with buyers, the price is just a fact of the buying and sales process. But in saying that, ballpark pricing should have already been addressed early on in the sales process with your prospect. That's why we included an entire budgetary line of questioning as part of, you know, Bootcamp 1, and as part of the qualification, the discovery stage, so that you can address early on if your prospect may have unrealistic expectations around what it actually costs to work with a quality professional MSP like yourself. And it would be at that, you know, kind of initial stages of the sales process that if you found out that the prospect actually had very unrealistic views around what a proper security and network management engagement program would actually cost, or if they told you, you know what, we only have so much budget for this, or we don't have enough money for this, or we didn't allocate sufficient funds for this, and now they're saying right out of the gate, yeah, can you reduce your fees? This is the time when you could kindly let them know that maybe you're not going to be the right MSP for them. You know, thank them for their time, cut ties, and kind of move on. The proposal stage of the sales process should not be the first time that your customer learns about the price range or your estimated program costs. Because yes, you may say that your advanced security program is, you know, $225 per user per month, but depending, you know, once you do that assessment, once you understand the quality and status of their network, you may need to adjust that a little bit. But they should know from that initial meeting what that potential range would be. By discussing price early on in the sales process and kind of getting it out of the way, that then leaves time for the rest of your sales process to talk about the business benefits and the impact that their organization can expect to receive by partnering with your MSP versus staying, you know, with their existing provider. And then if there is some sort of requirement because you found out about it through the assessment process that there's some upfront work that needs to be done prior to the actual start of the managed services security agreement, you know, maybe again from the assessment you realize that their network standards don't meet yours, or their security standards don't meet yours. Maybe there's some high risks that you need to really deal with first. Then you can kind of do a mini project and document what that mini project would be, the timelines, the start dates into this section of the proposal, because you can also use this to create a sense of urgency to show that you are ready to move on, that you have identified key risks that their MSP that they're using today has missed, and you would like to get that addressed as quickly as possible. Part 6, we're just talking about next steps. This is the part of the proposal where you outline, you know, for the prospect, you know, what happens next, should they accept your proposal, so that you can give them an idea as what they can expect from you and your team, but what you also might need from them in order to proceed. You know, so if the client is ready to proceed, you know, what kind of documentation do they need to review and sign off on? You know, hopefully you understand what that buying process looks like, what that signing off process is, what happens once the contract is signed. You want to let them know, you know, do you provide a welcome package? Do you schedule a kickoff meeting so that you can introduce the key contacts that's going to be involved with their organization? You know, kind of review what that whole process looks like. What does the onboarding process look like for them? what experience can they accept. Talk about and review how their team can engage with your team once they become a client. Are they going to be assigned an account manager? Use this time to introduce their new account manager. Whoever's going to be responsible for managing that relationship moving forward. Explain to them what's the customer request, how do they go and request support? What's that ticket creation like for them? Walk them through it, because they don't necessarily know this because they've never been a client of yours before. Also, make sure this is where you start talking and normalizing that you're going to be meeting with them on a regular basis to conduct executive business reviews. You may also know them as quarterly business reviews. I'm not a big fan of that term. I like the term EBR, executive business review, because it signifies who you want in that meeting. It's you as the executive talking to their executive team. So you want to kind of start normalizing it that we're going to meet, every 3 months or every 6 months, and get them used to that idea. The idea with this stage is just to make it easy for the client to understand, what they need to do next, what you need to do in response, to give them kind of the warm and fuzzies and the confidence to move forward with someone like yourself. Part 7, this is where you start talking about yourself and you start incorporating an MSP corporate overview. This is where you throw in some info about your MSP and why your solution is uniquely tailored to address their business requirements and priorities. A lot of the proposal that I've seen, they actually started their proposal with this corporate overview section first. I am a big fan of kind of putting it near the back, because the reason is that you want to keep this focused on the customer. You want to keep this focused on what they need, what their issues are, what their struggles are, what they're looking to achieve. And I feel that, if you start just talking about yourself first, like, we, and we, and we do this, you're going to lose the client. They probably already know a lot of this information anyways, because, the buying process today it's changed where prospects don't even reach out until they're about 2/3 of the way through to actually making a buying decision. So they likely already know everything about you because they've been following you on social, they've been following you on LinkedIn, they've been checking out your website, maybe they've attended some of your educational events. So you don't necessarily need to start the proposal conversation off talking about yourself. You want to keep it focused on them. But this is the section where, you do include stuff like, obviously your history, your skill sets, your specialties, things that really set you apart from hopefully whoever they're using today. If you've have any special accomplishments, any awards or other points of recognition that you've earned, that's a good information to include in this part of the proposal. You also want to make sure that you're including social proof. And if you haven't attended any of my marketing boot camps, social proof is all of those warm and fuzzy words, all those nice things that your customers have said about you, whether it's in the form of testimonials, quotes, reviews. If you have customers saying really nice things about you, we want to get it documented, making sure that we're using it as part of our social, make sure we're including on our website, but also making sure that we're tucking that into the proposal as well, because according to Harvard Business Review, 90% of all buying decisions, they do rely on peer recommendations. It's not just us, showing through our awards and our special recognition how great we are. Peers aren't, or prospects aren't going to believe that, but they are going to put more weight into what their peers are saying about them, especially if they're reviews and testimonials from other organizations that reside in the same industry. There's huge weight there. So you want to make sure that you're collecting your social proof on a regular basis, and then in your proposal only include the most recent set of social proof, because there's nothing, if it's social proof from a year ago, that doesn't mean much. So you want to make sure that you always have a process in place where you're continually getting up-to-date social proof. Okay, so make sure that if you haven't done so yet, you download that proposal template. So if you're using a proposal template today, this one may be very different from what you're using, because again, you'll notice that I didn't talk about technical, because again, keeping in mind who your business owner, who you're talking to, non-technical business owner, those technical tidbits, again, those graphs, those charts, those metrics, that really doesn't mean anything to them. You want to be that translator. You want to talk about what those metrics mean and put it into plain layman's term for that business owner to understand. All right. Now, with the proposal in hand, this is where we want to start kind of going through the negotiation process with our prospect. And some of the tips that I'm going to be referencing come from my own experiences in being in sales for many years. But there's also, if you're on LinkedIn, there's all sorts of, sales gurus out there that are offering advice. They're trying to get you to buy into, their sales package. But one person that he puts a lot of good information out there for free. His name is Chris Orlov. He's the CEO of this online sales training platform called pclub.io. He is trying to sell his sales platform, but he does offer some nice, good, common sense sales tips just via his LinkedIn. So I've populated some of those tips in here as well. But Chris's top tip that I think makes a whole lot of sense, especially when you articulate it in this way, is don't start negotiating until you have actually been crowned the MSP or the prospect's MSP of choice, right? I think this is especially important when you are up against the incumbent MSP, or maybe there's other MSPs that the prospect might be considering alongside yourself. So it's not just you and the incumbent, but maybe it's you and a couple of other MSPs versus the incumbent. If the prospect that you're working with, if they're starting to haggle with you about the monthly price, and you haven't even been declared their MSP of choice yet, then I think this is a very non-fruitful use of your time. You do want the prospect to first admit that they've selected you as their MSP of choice, from everyone else in the running, before you even begin that pricing discussion, right? So the tip really is, kind of park that pricing discussion, park the negotiations until the prospect has actually said, yes, we select you, we want to move forward with you. And, to do that, you can respond back and say, look, Mr. Prospect, we'd be happy to work towards an acceptable agreement that's beneficial to both parties, but it doesn't really make sense for us to start negotiating on price until you've actually chosen which MSP you ultimately want to partner with, kind of taking the price out of the question. So, Mr. Prospect, if price wasn't an issue, would you choose us as your next MSP? And then if they say, yes, we would, that is, that signals when you can start the negotiation process with them. But if they come back to you and say, yeah, no, we wouldn't, then this is where we need to kind of, do a double take, but start doing some digging to find out what then needs to be done to kind of move you into the pole position in their mind. Maybe there's some things that you neglected to do or you didn't do very well, but so what needs to be done to help you move into that pole position? But either way, hold off on starting negotiations, talking final price until the prospect has actually said, yes, you are our next MSP, or it becomes what, David Weeks, our VP of Customer Experience, I've heard Chris say this as well, it becomes a very painful race to the bottom, where the prospect is pitting really your MSP against the others to try and secure the cheapest monthly price possible. The second tip, make sure that you're presenting your proposal in person. I've had a lot of MSPs tell me that they just email their proposal out. Not very effective. You do want to kind of create a meeting, sit down with all the key stakeholders and go through the proposal together, because you need to see their body language. You need to see their facial expressions, because you need to see how they're responding to what they're reading, because this is important. And if you just email it out, you're not going to be able to see all that, what they're seeing and feeling. And then as the MSP business owner, you should be at that meeting. you should be leading that meeting. Yes, you may have an account executive, they're great. They may have been managing it all along, and you've kind of popped in here and there, but you are wanted at this meeting as the MSP business owner, because this is really kind of a business owner to business owner discussion. This is where you are essentially selling yourself. The prospect is buying you, the MSP business owner. So I really do encourage you to be in attendance in every close meeting. Fourth tip might be a little controversial, but I feel you should provide a written copy of your proposal to everyone that is attendance at that meeting. And the reason that I say this is it goes back to my first sales bootcamp, part 1, where we talked about the buying journey. In that bootcamp, I spoke about how Gartner says that nowadays there's anywhere from 6 to 10 key stakeholders that are involved in any complex purchasing decision, of which managed services is a complex purchasing decision. So you want to make sure that every key decision maker has their own copy of the proposal to refer to when they are contemplating whether or not to switch over to your MSP. You know, they'll need it to come to some sort of consensus. Now, you're probably thinking, Steph, if I'm giving them a copy of my proposal, they're just going to give it to their existing MSP and they're going to try and leverage it to get better pricing or better service out of their existing MSP provider. I'm not going to lie, probably, you know, that could be a real possibility. But thinking about, you know, this and kind of the long road here, you've already charged your prospect for your assessment. We talked about in stage 2 the importance of charging properly for your cyber risk assessment and for your business workflow assessment. So you have already ideally been properly compensated for the work that you've completed so far. The proposal is really what they've paid for, you know. So if you give the proposal over to their existing MSP, or they end up giving the proposal over to their existing MSP, you know, going to their MSP and say, hey, can you just implement this? It's probably their right. But again, thinking about the long game here, they wouldn't have gone through this whole exercise with you if they didn't have doubts around the abilities and the skill sets of their existing MSP. So yes, they could give their proposal over to their existing MSP. They could ask their existing MSP to implement it. But if that MSP runs into any issues or any problems, or maybe their existing MSP isn't able to actually implement some of the recommendations that you set forth in your program, you know, to address whatever problems or concerns or issues they're having, they likely are going to come back to you in the end. And so I like to see that proposal, or look at that proposal as that reminder that they do have a viable, competent alternative that they could switch to. So your proposal, if it's done well, could actually highlight how truly ineffective their existing MSP really is. Make sure you do go into the meeting with a strategy, with an agenda for what you want to cover off and accomplish during that meeting. And the way the proposal template is designed, you basically could go through it and just kind of present it as is. But, you know, I do encourage you, level up, you know, maybe use a PowerPoint presentation deck. So that's why I've included a sample there for you to download. Use the deck, you know, don't overload it with bullets and words and stuff like that, but just use it to highlight a few critical points that you want your audience to remember. You know, we don't want to overwhelm them. Then also make sure that we're anticipating the questions that you might be asked or the objections that might be raised. This is where we do want to put ourselves in the buyer's shoes and kind of think of all of those issues, those concerns, the objections that they may have, so that you can then be fully prepared in how you're going to address them. This is where role playing can come into play to help you build up that confidence and get that authority in your responses. And so we are going to be talking about objection handling and how to respond after the break. And then make sure once you have addressed all of their questions and concerns, that you go in and you ask for the business. Because if you have done a good job of developing the business case during your proposal presentation, you know, you've done a good job in stages 1 and stage 2, you know, finding out holes, finding out deficiencies, finding out, you know, areas where their existing MSP is a little bit limited, you have basically earned the right to ask for their business and to close the sale. A lot of MSPs, they don't come out and just bluntly ask for the business, but you do. You have to ask for that business. And so we are going to be reviewing after the momentarily an approach you can use for this. And then be sure to outline, as we talked about previously, what the next steps would be, you know, assuming that they have agreed with everything that you said so far, because again, we don't want to assume that they will just know how to work with us. And so this is where we want to provide a preview of the timeline, what's going to happen at each step. If there is that upfront project that's needed, let's talk about that, especially if there's a huge risk that has to be mitigated and resolved. We want to talk about that. And then my last couple of points, make sure that we respect your prospect's time. If they've given you 60 minutes, keep within that 60-minute time frame. You know, plan your time wisely, and that will come if you're practicing. You know, practice and practice and practice some more, because you want to appear knowledgeable, credible, and confident when you're delivering your proposal. So getting to the close. So once the MSP or the prospect, sorry, has told you that, you know, you are the MSP of choice, you know, they're ready to move forward with you, and we're ready to start negotiations. This is where we start kind of getting to the nitty-gritty, right? And a lot of salespeople, not just MSP salespeople, but a lot of salespeople find this probably the most stressful part of the entire sales process. Because, you know, if you think about it, no one likes asking someone for a large financial commitment upfront, right? You know, no one likes feeling rejected. No one likes getting that sense of failure, that they weren't, you know, that they weren't liked or they weren't chosen. But your ability to develop a strong negotiation strategy where you're asking for the business, we need it for our sales success. And if you were able to implement, you know, a great discovery process at the outset of the sales process, that is what's going to make your negotiations, you know, when you get to this stage, go much more smoothly. So again, I strongly encourage, if you missed part one on what a good discovery looks like, go back into Enable University, Enable You, within the Enable Me, and just go to the Head Nerd section, and you will see all of my boot camps there. And it was called Cracking the Code of MSP Sales Success, the Discovery Qualification Meeting. So looking at what does a good negotiation strategy look like? And this does come from Chris Orlob that I mentioned a few moments ago. I know there's a lot of different strategies out there. There's so many books written on that. But I particularly like kind of Chris's approach that he provides in his training, because it's not just a bunch of tactics that you kind of throw at the wall to see what sticks. But I really like how Chris focuses on developing a repeatable, systematic strategy, you know, that process around your negotiation sessions. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So it all starts with first summarizing the process so far, because we want to kind of level set everyone, you know, in that buying group, because we need everybody on the same page. And so starting the negotiation process, saying something like, you know what, I'd just like to spend, you know, the first few minutes summarizing the key elements of our partnership, just to ensure that we are all on the same page and we all know what's at stake. Would that be okay? You know, obviously getting, you know, their okay and their permission as we're going through this. So we're spending the next 5 minutes really summarizing, you know, what your prospects' problems are that you uncovered during the discovery and the assessment stages, talking about, you know, your unique solution, how you're going to help resolve that. And so this really goes back to, you know, if you need to go back to parts 3 of your proposal document, go back to parts 4 and 5, where you're talking about your solution and the scope of services. Because we want to spend this time up front reminding them of the business value and the partnership benefits that they can achieve by signing with you that maybe they're not getting today from their existing MSP. So you want to spend time up front speaking about, you know, how working with your MSP is going to help solve those business challenges more effectively than who they're using today. That's going to help make their organization better moving forward. So again, reviewing the problems, reviewing the pain points that they specifically have communicated to you back in that discovery stage, and then reminding them what's at stake if they choose to do nothing or if they decide to go with someone else. Because by framing what you have heard really at the outset of this meeting and reminding them of the business value that you offer, that can be used to kind of help, you know, deflect or deflate the pricing objection that they might be wanting to throw at you when you present them the monthly fee. So anyway, once you provided an overview of the business value that you offer, that's when we need to put the ball back into their court. And so we want to ask them, so in your opinion, what needs to happen next so that we can move forward and have you switch, your monthly managed services contract over to us? And by asking a question like this, it puts you in control of the negotiation process, not your prospect, which is ideally what you want. You always want to take that leadership position and do what you can to maintain control of the negotiation process. And so by asking this question, this is where you begin to get all of their requirements, or what Chris calls their asks, get all of their asks out on the table. And don't deal with each ask on an individual basis as they're presented to you. Get all of the asks articulated to you so you can see what that whole negotiation picture looks like that's going to be in front of you. And we all know one of the asks that you're likely going to get is going to be about price. But this is where we make price kind of the last thing that you negotiate on. So it's all about kind of parking it for now. Don't get drawn into premature negotiations, because price is always going to be that really easy objection and that easy ask. Prospects are always going to be looking for a cheaper deal. So as soon as that price request presents itself into the conversation, don't get sidetracked. Just continue digging to see what else needs to happen before they will sign with you. So you can kind of deflect this by saying something like, you know what, Mr. Prospect, assuming we can come to an agreement on price, what else do you need from us, before you feel comfortable signing with us? What other steps need to happen before you can decide to move forward with our MSP? And then just keep repeating this question until the prospect finally tells you, I think that's it. After all of that, I think we'd be good to sign. Then after you feel that you have been able to identify all of their asks, this is where we want to summarize them back to them, restate back to them all of their asks that they told you about, because we want to keep working towards that conditional close, right? So you can say to them, all right, if we can come to an agreement on, say, A, B, and C in your mind, is there anything else that's preventing you from maybe making the switch over from who you're using today over to our MSP? And then hopefully the prospect says, yeah, correct, satisfy A, B, C, D, or whatever, and we'll feel comfortable moving forward. Then you want to ask your prospect then to kind of prioritize the importance of their asks in their mind. Have them rank them, if you can, from their most important requests to the least important, so that you can see where potential deal stoppers might be for you, that you're going to have to negotiate around. But always leave price to the end, because they're probably going to say that price is their main priority. Always kind of, softly say, yes, we will talk about that, but let's just leave this to the end. We want to deal with the other ones first. And then for all the other priority items, get them to not only just rank them, but get them to explain and qualify why that particular requirement or why that particular ask is a priority for them. Why is that important to them? What's driving that need to begin with in their world? And so it's really about kind of peeling back the onion to uncover the prospect's underlying needs so that you can figure out a way to address and solve that need. And you don't need to blindly agree to everything that your prospect asks for. They'll probably give you a lot, or maybe they give you a few, but whatever, you don't need to agree to everything that they're asking for. Even if there are big asks in the sales cycle, you still want to find out what happens after you've completed that ask, because the last thing you want to do is, you're working on, resolving some of these asks, thinking that, you're pretty much good now, only to find out that you still have 4 more of them that you need to contend with. And if they keep coming at you about the price, this is where you can kind of, softly, again, try and park that price question by saying, well, what's What's driving you for this price change? Are you not sold on the business value that we can provide to your MSP, or is it something else maybe? And then once you've gathered all of the asks, you fully understand their order of importance, they prioritize, rank them for you. That is really when the true negotiations can start. You know, this is where you can start determining what you will and won't agree to, you know, what you will give so that you can get. And that's really what's going to help move us towards signing that deal. And really, for every give that you give, make sure you get a get from the prospect, meaning that every time that you're willing to concede on something for the prospect, make sure you get something back from them in return. I'm not a huge fan on giving discounts or any sort of pricing concessions, but if this is something that you feel that you need to give, big asterisk there, then make sure you get something big back in return. Like, make sure you get a case study that they'll agree to sit down with your case writer. Make sure you get their agreement to, you know, would you be willing, you know, we're hosting an event in a couple of months' time. Would you be willing to speak at that event or be part of a panel? Like, anything that can help you from a marketing and lead gen perspective would be maybe the one concession I would give for giving a price discount. But it's not, you know, for every give that you give, you know, this give and get is a real dance, right? You know, you want to take them one at a time so that every give that you give, you want to make sure you're getting a get back in return, that they're giving you something every single time, because this way we're training the prospect, right, in our negotiation process, that every time they ask you for something, if you give a concession, you're expecting something back in return. And it's a really good strategy because it will slow down the pace at which concessions are being thrown at you from the prospect, because it's going to get the prospect to really think critically about what they truly want out in the negotiations, because they'll know that for every concession that they ask for, they're going to have to give you something in return of that. Because if you just give in to every concession that they ask for without making it known that you do require and expect something back in return, I kind of think of them like kids, right? You know, they're going to keep asking and expecting you to give something every time they request something in return, because you're just making it so much easier for them, and you've just been so accommodating to their requests. So again, it's kind of like kids. Without setting this kind of give and get expectation, prospects are going to keep pushing boundaries, and they're going to keep pushing their luck to see what else they can get out of you. So it's really kind of that cautionary note. Don't fall victim to this. Be comfortable really making known your expectations to the prospect so that negotiations don't get out of control, you know, really leaving you on the losing end of things. So we want to talk about how do you go about handling your prospects' objections, because we are going to hear them. So another tip that I wanted to offer, and I used to do this all the time when I was in sales for many years, whenever I heard a concern or I got an objection from any one of my partners that I was speaking with, I would often write that objection down in my notebook, because by taking the time to write my objection down, you know, kind of forced me to pause. So I wasn't automatically reacting back to that objection. It kind of forced me to pause and gave me some time to really kind of collect my thoughts, think about how I was going to respond back, what clarifying questions I was going to ask to help guide me in the best response. And it was something that I also used in my post-sale debrief, and we're going to be talking about that shortly as well as part of this boot camp, because after every win or loss, I would do a post-sales debrief on how I thought everything went. And, you know, by writing down each objection I received, again, not only did it help me in the moment, but it also allowed me to create some of my own sales training and kind of the sales training run book for myself. So every time I got a certain objection from a partner, you know, because we sold different products and stuff, I had then devised a good way, or if I had devised a good way of kind of responding back that seemed to resonate and work well with the partner, that kind of moved the deal forward. I would document that conversation in this, kind of personal sales run book that I then maintain for myself. And then I would refer back to it if, I was practicing in anticipation for another closing call. So if I happen to come across that similar objection in another situation, I would refer back to that. And I found it was very helpful in cementing that experience for the next time. So it really helped in terms of building up my confidence and building up my credibility with that. So it worked for me. I thought I'd throw it out there as well. So looking at the different types of objections, there's really 5 that we really should be ready to anticipate and be prepared to answer. And they're typically centered around price or lack of budget, lack of trust, lack of credibility, concerns over the quality of service, and usually around lack of urgency or just the desire to kind of stick with the status quo. So let's talk about, kind of the pricing objections, because likely most of the objections you're going to hear is going to be around price, even though, according to Joe Moroney and his smart sales method, price only represents 9% of the buying decision. I feel that they represent probably 100% of the objections that you're likely going to hear, because there is a lot of risk in switching MSP service providers. And it can be very scary for a business owner to fire whoever they're using today and start a relationship with someone else. So it's really kind of that devil you know versus the devil that you don't. So typically concerns over your monthly price, those are going to be the easiest objections to throw out there to help alleviate that risk for them. So, the first objection that you may hear, your prospect is going to tell you, your proposal is much more expensive than we were expecting it to be. It's more than what we're paying with our existing service provider. And so when you hear an objection like this, don't be tempted to immediately jump into kind of the save the sale mode, right? This isn't a pricing objection, really. The prospect is just sharing some information with you, with the hope that by saying this, your next move is going to offer them a discount or to offer to match what they might be paying today with their existing provider. But I want to tell you, don't fall for it. If you have followed the steps and the questioning techniques in part 1 and part 2 of this bootcamp series, then really you just need to ask one question. And this is where you want to say, Mr. Prospect, do you feel that we missed some sort of unexpected budgetary constraint when we spoke about your technology budget and our program costs and what we provide to our customers? Or, really what I had talked about earlier, asking them, Mr. Prospect, are you not sold on the business value our MSP can provide to your organization? Or is it something else? Because again, this really isn't a discussion on highest quality or lowest cost. It's really about what's a fair price. And that fair price is based on your solution and how you can improve the safety and the productivity of their employees while better managing and mitigating their risks. Or another way that you can handle this objection where your price is being compared to what they're currently paying today from their existing MSP is really to remind them that there was a reason they agreed to meet with you, several weeks ago, and why they started this whole process with you in the first place. And to remind yourself, really to have the confidence in what you're selling and the value that you do provide to your customers. You have to believe that cybersecurity is a real threat to your prospect's business. That's why we do the assessment, the cyber assessment, so that when it comes to successfully closing sales, this is what's needed. If you're kind of a business owner that wears a lot of hats, this is where we kind of need to take the tech hat off and we need to put the CEO hat on, and acknowledge that in this case, when it comes to closing and putting your proposal together and closing sales, we're not a tech anymore at this point. You're a risk mitigator who leads a cybersecurity organization, and really accepting the fact that cybersecurity is no longer a technical issue that needs to be well dealt with. When you're dealing with business owners, this actually is now a business issue that has to be addressed. And that starts at the very, very top. Even if you look at the redesigned NIST cybersecurity framework, there used to be 5 functions, and now they've added that 6th, and it's called the govern function. And the whole idea with that govern function is that, again, going to that cybersecurity isn't a technical issue that is to be solved with technology. It is a business issue, and business owners now have a fiduciary responsibility for the safety and secure of their network and of their data. And so if you know via your assessment that there are gaps, that there are holes, and the business owner is not doing what is needed to address those holes, then this has to be brought to their attention. And this is how you kind of mitigate that pricing objection. Because with your services, what you are effectively doing is you're protecting a business owner's livelihood against some unknown entity that can take it all away in a heartbeat, right? You know, if they don't take the protection and the security of their network and their employees seriously. So it's okay to think about this from a profitability standpoint. It's okay to run a profitable business. And you might be wondering, Steph, why are you making that point? And I come across regular conversations with MSPs who are tech first, you know, technical business owners. You know, it doesn't take that much to do what you need to do. And so you feel bad charging what you charge. Top, you know, MSPs are doing really well in the cybersecurity space. I've had MSPs tell me they're charging anywhere from $250 to $350 per user per month. And then I have other MSPs tell me, well, I can never charge that much. My customers would never pay that. I don't need to charge that much to do what I need to do. But when it comes to something as cybersecurity and really reinforcing that is the business owner's responsibility and they're accountable towards this, you know, especially with the changes they've made to NIST, it's okay to charge these levels, because there is a lot of risk that you're taking on as the MSP. And it's also the point where you just went through this whole assessment process. You evaluated their network, you evaluated where the holes are potentially from a cybersecurity standpoint, and you did all of this so that you could remove price as that negotiating tool, so that you can make it very clear to them what is wrong with their existing network setup, you know, where their MSP is kind of falling down on the job, and then what is needed to correct the issues that you've identified. So you identified those holes, those gaps in the prospect's network. You've identified holes in their security protection levels. And so now we want to use that information to really articulate the amount of risk that business is now currently exposed to. You know, again, either because their MSP that they're using today, they're missing some things in their support coverage, or maybe they don't offer certain things in their support coverage, or maybe they've been laxed and they haven't really mandated or insisted that the prospect take the necessary steps to improve their internal security posture. And that's really the goal behind your proposal. You want to be highlighting this for them, that with your program structure and how you present it via your proposal, this is what you're using to kind of help outline what you feel needs to be done to reduce and better mitigate their business risk and make them more secure and better protected than what they are currently under the care of their incumbent MSP. And so, again, if you get that pricing objection, another way you can respond back is to really say, look, you know, my job as the MSP is to protect the livelihood of my customers and the livelihood of their employees. Your network is underprotected, you know, with the current setup that is in place. And so there's a big likelihood that your business will not survive an attack. So based on our assessment, we've identified what upgrades to your existing network and upgrades to your security protection coverage should be implemented and what needs to be done moving forward. And this is just what comprehensive security coverage costs. So it's kind of making them, you know, kind of see that things have changed. Because this really isn't about comparing apples to apples. That's not what you're trying to do with your sales process. Your assessment process is all around finding gaps and then presenting those findings in a way that makes it evident that you're not like who they're using today. You are different, and that you take care of and you manage your existing client accounts very, very differently than how they're being managed today. And so I really encourage MSPs to kind of own this difference and weaponize this difference and be confident and say, yes, we are likely going to be more expensive than what your existing MSP provider is charging you today, because of the comprehensive coverage and protection that we provide to our customers. We implement what is truly needed to properly protect businesses like yours, and that's why businesses choose to partner with us, because they cannot risk having their network and their employees knocked offline and unable to work because of an undetected cyber attack. And this is where making sure that you have that social proof included in your proposal will be really helpful, because you can kind of then go back to your proposal, look at the social proof and say, look, this is just not us saying this. Here are other quotes, other testimonials of other businesses, hopefully in the same industry that you're talking to now, that talk about why they chose us, why they work with us, how we've helped them. And so you can use those peer testimonials to kind of help overcome some of these pricing objections. Another pricing objection that you likely will hear that we want to be prepared for is, is this your best price? Can you offer me a discount? And the all favorite, do have a deal for me, especially if they're coming at you or you're coming at them month end. I feel these are very frustrating objections to deal with because you've just spent considerable amount of time really assessing their network so that you can put together this proposal. Again, I've kind of mentioned that I don't feel that you should ever offer a discount or negotiate when it comes to your proposal pricing unless you're getting a substantial get in return, again, like a case study, like a video testimonial, something big that you can put on your social or put up there in front of other prospects. But the other reason I don't feel you should ever offer discounts or negotiate on prices, if you start your relationship off like that, with a new client and you're giving them a discount because they asked for it, you're setting a dangerous precedence with them. They're going to come to expect that for any other sales opportunity or project work that you might present them in the future, they're going to ask for and expect a discount in return. And that's really what's going to cause you to really lose all credibility in the eyes of the customer, because they'll know that your price isn't your real price. And they'll know that with just kind of a bit of back and forth, they can get a better price out of you. And I don't think that's a good way to start a relationship with a new client. Kind of going back to you parents that are out there, it's kind of like parenting, right? Like, you never allow your child to go with you where you then give in to their demands, right? Whether they're young or whether you're dealing with teenagers, because that is really what's going to undermine your authority, and they're not going to take you seriously. They'll learn that when you say no, you don't really mean no. They'll just continue to grind and grind because they know eventually they'll be able to get what they want. So my feeling is when you hear any type of objection when it comes to price, stand firm, convey that your price is your price and that you are positioning your best and final price to them. Kind of saying, no, this is my price. I've already gone. I've priced this appropriately to account for the quality of the monthly services and support that you can expect to receive from my team. This also will work better as long as you are targeting and you're working with the right type of prospect. Because you could have the best sales process in the world, but if you're not working with the right type of prospect that understands that security is a business issue and it's not a technical problem that needs to be solved, that's what's going to help get a customer to kind of pay what that appropriate price is and that fair price for quality of services. And now I didn't really talk about ICP or ideal client profile in this one, but I talk about it quite extensively back in my marketing boot camps. But at the end of the day, you can be doing everything fine, everything perfect, but if you're fundamentally talking to the wrong type of prospect that doesn't appreciate their own cybersecurity responsibilities and accountability, then you might have a more difficult time getting them to sign on at your price point. So you might also have a prospect that might be concerned about your credibility as an MSP, or maybe the quality of the services that you provide and whether you actually will be able to truly support them better than their existing MSP is able to today. And so this is, again, where that social proof is going to be very, very helpful. So this is where you do want to let it shine. So you want to make sure that you're promoting your social proof, that you're offering case studies, testimonials, quotes, references for your prospects to review, and making sure that you do have some sort of cadence set up so that you're getting ongoing fresh reviews, fresh feedback, because there's nothing that kind of diminishes the value of your social proof if it's, you know, a year or 2 years old. You want to make sure that, you know, you're getting regular social proof to include, because that's really what's going to help overcome that lack of trust or credibility. Because as much as you can say you're great, businesses want to hear other businesses, what their opinion of you as well. So if you can provide social proof, especially from other businesses that are in the same industry as who you're talking to today, that's going to be very powerful. Lack of urgency could be another set of objections you might be getting, because switching MSPs, as I said, it's a really big move. It's a move that no business takes lightly. So you may hear from prospects, you know, as you're going through negotiations with them, you know, why do we need to do this now? Or maybe we can just wait. And so this is when you do want to go back to your initial discovery conversation with the prospect, remind them of the challenges, remind them of their priorities that they've outlined to you that kind of triggered this whole process, you know, kind of going back to part 3 of your proposal, where you're talking about the issue identification, you know, where you're getting kind of their sentiments that they were telling you about some of the struggles that they were experiencing. We want to bring that back and use their words against them. So you can say, look, you told us that the biggest challenge facing your team was X. Are you no longer interested in trying to fix X? Or saying something like, you told us that X was an urgent issue for you and it needs to be resolved quickly because you've been struggling with this issue for over a year. Are you saying that this is no longer an urgent item for you? You know, would you mind kind of taking me through what's changed in the last couple of weeks? So again, kind of using their words against them. Or again, after all of this, the prospect could say, you know what, I think our existing MSP provider can probably do all of this. And so again, we want to explore what has really changed in the last couple of weeks to make them feel this way, because you can bring back, use their words against them, you know, from our discovery meeting a few weeks ago, you told us something completely different. You didn't have faith or confidence in them. So again, don't be afraid to remind them of those previous conversations or those previous apprehensions that they communicated to you. So saying something like, you wanted to meet with us because you had concerns that your existing MSP might be missing something when it came to managing your account. So, you know, are you saying that you no longer have those concerns? Or you told us that your existing MSP wasn't doing enough from a cybersecurity perspective and you were worried about getting breached. Maybe take me through what's changed there. Again, reminding them that what could happen, there could be some dire consequences if they remain with the status quo and if they don't make the switch. Again, that was the whole reason why you went through the whole assessment process, finding out their risks, finding out where the holes, where the gaps, where the deficiencies are, so that, you know, if they come back to you and say, I think, you know, we can stay with the status quo, or I think our existing MSP could do this, you can kind of say to them, well, if they could have done it, wouldn't have they done this? It looks like this is not important to them, but it's important to us. But basically, I wanted to include a section like this because practicing how you are going to handle objections, very important part of the sales process, because nothing is more important or detrimental to a deal than letting sales objections go unaddressed until, you know, especially kind of these final stages, because we all know that the longer you hold on to an opinion, the stronger that opinion is going to be and the harder it's going to be to change that opinion or change your perception of that. So not only do we want to kind of welcome objections, deal with them head on, you also want to proactively solicit them throughout the entire sales process. And you do this just by, you know, periodically asking questions like, okay, you know, do you have any concerns around whatever? Or are there any obstacles that you're seeing that might prevent you from wanting to switch over to us? Or, you know, this is where kind of that body language comes into play. You know, you seem to be a little worried about something. You know, would you mind sharing your thoughts with us on that? And so when objections do arise from your prospect, we don't want to give up, right? Rather, we want to continue to re-emphasize the value and the benefits behind your services, because when involved in any sort of B2B sale, what I'm showing here is 4 business drivers that you're going to want to make sure that you continually touch on during your B2B sales process, especially when you're dealing with non-technical business owners. And I, again, like to think of these 4 drivers as, you know, a CEOs or a business owners love language, right? We don't want to talk gadgets, widgets, percentages, charts, graphs. We want to use language that's important to them because they're ultimately in charge of their business and running a profitable business. And so we want to use these drivers to really reinforce our credibility and authority and really highlight in layman's terms why we are the better MSP than who they're using today. So when explaining your solution, going through your recommendations, you want to make sure that you're demonstrating how you're going to help improve their revenues. That's what CEOs care about. How are you going to help them become a more operationally efficient and productive organization? That's what they're going to care about, because poor processes, manual processes, idle employees, they're very costly to an organization. You want to talk about how your solution is going to help mitigate their business risk and make their organizations more secure, because it isn't about if they're going to receive a cyber attack, but now it's more about when. And when they do, you want to emphasize how your services are going to be able to minimize the consequences and minimize the impact of that attack, because your goal is you want to get everybody back to work and get those doors open as quickly as possible, because again, idle employees means that the business isn't making any money. You also want to help them, explain them how you're going to help them make them more profitable, how you're going to help them make more competitive by either saving money or making money. So again, this is what we need to communicate and how we need to communicate with a non-technical business owner. Widgets, gadgets, percentages, graphs, charts, not going to do it. But if you can speak in these terms, that's going to be, that's where the business owner is going to be interested in moving forward, because this is how you are really setting yourself apart from who they're using today. And then it would be presumptuous to think that while working to close your deal with your prospect, you're not going to run into a few other barriers, right? That they're going to get in your way. You're going to have talks that potentially could drag on and on, no decision in sight. There may be an unwillingness by one party or both parties to compromise or make some concessions. There might be some really tough competition that makes your prospect reluctant to close with you. So I just kind of wanted to touch on a few other negotiating tips that you can use to kind of help overcome these roadblocks and push your deal forward. The first one being making sure that you do communicate to your prospect the negotiation process right from the start. I think part of the reason why MSPs, or really any sales professional, have issues closing deals is because they don't do a good enough job communicating what the exact process is around how the negotiations are going to unfold. And so when you're booking your final meeting to review your sales proposal with that prospect, be sure that you're going to outline how that meeting is going to go. Outline who you need there from your end, outline who from your team will be there to kind of help facilitate the meeting. Make sure you outline what the agenda is going to be, what you're going to discuss, what you're looking to achieve, kind of the goal of the meeting. Obviously, the goal is you want to sign a contract. Make sure that you get a good understanding of what they're looking for out of this meeting as well, because we don't want to make assumptions, right? We want to make sure that we are all on the same page, hopefully with the same goal when we come into this meeting. Building rapport, tracking consensus by asking questions that reiterate what the other party is saying. Attitude, how you approach the whole negotiation process can really help you win the deal, or it can cause you to lose the deal. So hopefully throughout the sales process, you've done a really good job establishing a connection with that prospect and that you've gained their trust. And so when you're delivering your sales proposal, you want to make sure that you're open, that you're transparent. We want to make sure that we're continually asking questions just to make sure that there's no miscommunication or, again, those assumptions happening that can help mitigate the risk of confusion when you're trying to get, finalize that deal. Setting benchmarks and deadlines in the proposal. Make sure that in that rollout plan, if there is one, attach dates to it. Attach dates to each of the milestones, because that will really indicate that you've kind of planned this through and that you are ready to begin. Be descriptive in the different steps and the processes that's going to be, with you two working together. And again, if you have uncovered some significant issues and there's some initial mini project work that has to be done, bring it up to an acceptable level, get the security standards in play, then attach dates to those projects as well. Because again, it's going to show that you can put them in a better position very, very quickly by partnering with you. Keeping the conversation focused on the benefits that they can expect to receive by you, by working with you. We just talked about that in the previous slide. And then don't avoid having those hard conversations. If you need to get the deal back on track, if you see it veering off course, like if you see that something is not right or something's going wrong with your deal and you don't call it out, you may find that your deal could be at risk. So as uncomfortable as it may be, get comfortable with calling out the exact thing that you hope won't happen by saying, you know what, if I'm reading you right, I'm starting to feel that we're missing the mark with you here. Don't hide it, bring it to a head, have that difficult conversation, because you always want to make sure that you're up to speed on what's going on in that prospect's mind, because if they are having concerns and you're feeling it, call it out and get those concerns on the table. And then if you don't know what to do next, and I used to when I was in sales, this would sometimes happen to me. If you don't know where to take the negotiations next, ask a question. Ask the prospect, okay, so what do you feel we need to do next? Where do we go from here? What do you see the next steps being? By continually asking questions, especially if you're feeling a little bit lost at that particular moment, and that happens with the best of us, asking questions accomplishes a couple of things. Right, what I said earlier on, it keeps you in control of the negotiations, because he who asks questions is he who maintains control of the flow of the conversation. Also works to keep the prospect talking, because if you can keep the prospect talking, this is where you're inevitably going to get hopefully more information or more detailed information or explanations on things. And that's information that hopefully you can use to continue building your case to create kind of that win-win scenario. And then based on that new conversation, it will hopefully help, get you reconnected and giving you some ideas on where to take the conversation next and moving that forward. So I always kept this in mind when I was in the middle of negotiations and I was getting a little bit flustered. When in doubt, ask a question. That kind of gives you a little bit of time to kind of sit back and maybe there's more information coming at you that you can then pick up on and use. Make sure that you're continuing to shine a light on your social proof. Again, case studies, testimonials, quotes, references, hugely impactful when it comes to helping to close deals. And then if you're finding that it keeps stalling or you're not moving the deal forward, drop a hint that negotiations are done, or be ballsy and shut down negotiations altogether. Talks may continue to go on and on and on because your prospect feels that they might still be able to get more out of you, or they're hoping that you're going to concede on some additional items that maybe you've outlined in your proposal. If that's the case, if you feel that talks are done, then don't hesitate to say something like, you know what, I kind of feel that we've reached agreement on everything and that our negotiations are finished. Would you agree? And then just wait to see if they offer anything new that might need to be discussed. Or, sometimes what I would do is I would bring up a minor detail that still needs to be agreed upon, like maybe, the start of an onboarding date or something like that, because, you partners go through onboarding with us. So I would say something like, all right, so let's just agree on the onboarding date or the onboarding process. And I think that's all we have left to settle on, correct? Because by saying this, it communicates to the prospect that as far as you're concerned, that's really the last piece of business that needs to be taken care of. And so if you act like things are settled or mostly settled because you just need to agree on this little onboarding date, and you make it known that you're really not in the position to discuss any additional concessions, then hopefully that may motivate your prospect to start moving towards getting this deal closed. And really important, make sure that you understand and set your limits. As you're preparing to present your proposal, make sure that you understand, what your target point is, and that's really kind of what your goal, what your ideal outcome is, and what your resistance point is. And that's really kind of your limits, like the lowest offer, the lowest outcome that you're willing to accept, because it's the range between these 2 points that's your bargaining zone, or the area in which an agreement can be reached. And so you want to make sure that you have, going into the deal or into negotiations, a clear idea as to what you want and what you don't want out of the negotiation, because that's what's really going to help direct your communication and know when there is potential for a deal, or more importantly, when there is not any potential for a deal. And then building on this, and it might seem to be kind of a risky, counterintuitive move, if negotiations are getting heated, if you are being asked to compromise or sacrifice to the point that it's going to harm your MSP or lessen your ability to properly support your other clients, then it might just make sense to walk away. So it is important before going into negotiations, you know, what your walk away limits are. You know, when you feel that a viable deal is no longer going to be in either party's intentions or in your best intentions. And again, you want to determine what that bottom line is going in, because if you try and define that in the heat of the moment, in the heat of negotiations, you couldn't end up making a mistake that could be detrimental to your MSP. And so this is where, again, if negotiations are getting a little bit heated, you could say to the prospect, I don't know, it doesn't look like our MSP is going to be a good fit for your business after all. So maybe you do stick with the status quo, stay with who you're using today, or maybe you consider moving to that other MSP to partner with. And you know what? No hard feelings. And I think by saying this, it may help to kind of shift the focus away from whatever that issue is that seems to be blocking your ability to move forward, to move that deal forward. And so by saying this and by offering to walk away, maybe then it will prompt the prospect to kind of acquiesce and, you know, see things from your perspective, which could hopefully maybe get the deal going again, assuming it's a fair and reasonable offer that you've put in front of them. Excuse me. And then if the prospect does decide to call your bluff and the deal dissolves, then maybe it might actually be for the best, because negotiations should really be kind of a win-win for both parties, where both parties are able to walk away feeling satisfied. But despite all your best efforts, the reality is you're not going to win every deal. Even the best salespeople in the world don't have a 100% close ratio. So what can you do to increase the odds that next time you'll have better success? So this is something conducting a win-loss analysis is, if you're not in the habit of doing something like this now, like doing kind of that post-mortem at the close of the deal, I really encourage you to start incorporating it into your sales process. And really what this win-loss analysis is, it can help you get a handle on the overall buyer's experience, you know, from the moment that they decide to engage with you to the day that the deal is signed, or whether they decide to walk away. And I think it's a really important part of the sales process, because the outcomes or any little micro lessons that are learned from this debrief can then be incorporated back into your sales process so that you can continually work to improve it. And so you really want to try and work to understand, why did a prospect become a customer of yours? You know, what are all the things that you did right, or those things that you did well? And those are things that kind of really reinforces all the positive aspects of your sales process that worked. And because we want to make sure that as we move forward with the next prospect, that we're doing those exact same activities. So we don't want to skip over them. But we also want to understand why your prospect didn't sign with you. You know, why did they opt to stay with their existing MSP, or why did they decide to go to a competitor? We want to find that out as well. Because according to a 2021 competitive intelligence report by Crayon, they found that 84% of businesses say that their markets are increasingly crowded, more crowded than they've ever been. 53% are saying that the majority of their sales deals are considered competitive. So it really is important to understand why you win deals and why you lose deals. And there was an older survey, it's from 2017, by CSO Insights, and researchers found that those sales teams that regularly used win-loss analysis, they outperformed those that didn't. And they saw their teams, their win rates increased by over 14% than those that did not consistently conduct win-loss reviews. And Pragmatic Institute has found that 74% of organizations surveyed don't perform any form of win-loss analysis, but out of those that do, 68% of them characterize the win-loss exercise as being either very or extremely important in helping them increase sales and drive more revenue. And I'm part of that 68%. I absolutely saw my win rates increase when I constantly debriefed what went well, what did better, and tried to find out what happened. Because again, it really makes sense, right? Like if you can uncover the details around why you won or why you lost, those details are naturally going to make your sales process stronger, especially in the next set of go-arounds. And it's going to help you really get a better understanding of how do you increase your future win rate. So again, something if you're not really doing today, encourage you to do that. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. You know, you could send out a survey. I always found just doing kind of a quick call, 15-20 minute phone interview always got me better results. So looking at the types of questions that you would ask in a win-loss analysis, you know, this came from a good blog post from HubSpot. I haven't listened out here, but basically, you know, what's the biggest reason why you chose our MSP in the event that you won the client? Or what was the biggest reason why you decided to stay with us? Or why did you decide to stay with your existing MSP or go to a competitor, you know, if you lost that prospect? Because if you ended up winning the client, this kind of information is going to be fantastic for future marketing campaigns that you might be doing or future sales campaigns. You can use this information to help promote, you know, your distinct sales advantage, why you're different from other MSPs in the area. Because again, it's not you telling the world, well, how great you are or why you are great. It's your customers that are talking about why you are so great. And that is far more powerful to a prospect than you telling that. But then if you ended up losing a prospect to another MSP, or you got maybe that dreaded no decision, or we'll just stay with the status quo, if they come back to you and they give you something vague, like it was price, or it was, you know, the competition seemed better, see if you can dig a little bit further on this, because the price again is an easy one, competition is an easy one. They may not be totally willing to give you, you know, their full opinion on it, but try and see if you can uncover kind of what the real reason was. You know, just tell them that you're trying to improve things and, you know, you take this seriously. And so could they explain to you a little bit more about what they mean by price, or can they explain a little bit more of what they mean by the competition so that you can go and improve your own sales? Asking, you know, what's the difference between us and maybe the previous MSP or other MSPs that you considered, whether you won or lost the deal. Finding out what went into that decision criteria, you know, what were they specifically looking for in a new MSP that we were able to meet, or maybe we weren't able to meet. Because it is important to understand what prospects are basing their decisions on, because this could be information that you can use to help improve your existing services, because maybe you find out that you don't currently offer a service today, but their competitor does. You can use that to fix things. Or maybe you can use to fix some messaging from a marketing and sales perspective, because maybe your prospect is saying, well, I was looking for this, and you're like, we do offer that. And so there's a marketing messaging there, or there's a sales messaging mismatch there. So you would want to get that corrected. Ask them, how well did we tailor the presentation or services to your requirements? Good question to ask, because everyone wants to feel special. Everyone wants to feel unique during the sales process. So you want to be able to do what you can to kind of tailor that experience for them. Asking them, did they check out any of your reviews? Did they read any case studies or customer testimonials before beginning to engage with us? Did those help in their decision-making process? This will give you a good idea on the impact your social proof is having. Finding out, what was the experience like working with our team? Would you be able to give it a rating? You know, 1 being everything didn't go very well, to 10 being, you know, we're extremely satisfied with the experience. And then finding out, how easy did we make this decision for you? And I think the last one, what's one thing that you would recommend that we would change for next time? Because win or lose, you should always be looking for and soliciting feedback from your new customers and from your lost prospects so you can incorporate it back into your sales process. So again, just wanted to put some questions out there, use them as a guideline to help get you started if this is something that you're not really doing today. Start with just a couple of questions and then build on it as you gain more experience with it. And then lastly, how to increase your close ratios. So the whole goal of this 3-part sales series was to help you improve your overall sales process in the event that you might be struggling with it today. So if you haven't had a chance to attend, any of my lead gen boot camps that I delivered, I think it was back in probably June when I delivered them last, or, part 1 and part 2 that preceded this, this session, this slide is really kind of meant to be a recap of all of that. So kind of 4 points on how to increase your close ratios. The first one being making sure that we do target the right kind of prospect for your MSP. My lead gen, my marketing boot camps really talked about making sure that we have properly defined our ICP, our ideal client profile. We want to make sure that we are targeting the right kind of person, the right kind of business. In my marketing boot camps, I quote this stat that there was 400 salespeople that were surveyed, and they found that 50% of salespeople are generally engaging with prospects who are not a good fit for the services that they offer. That's a real waste of time. That's a real waste of money and effort. So if your targeting is off and you're selling to the wrong buyer, they're never going to feel the pain or the emotion to take action. So this is where, to help increase your close rate, if we're not targeting the right person, go back to the drawing board maybe. Go back and speak to your best customers to learn why they're your customers in the first place, and use that information to redefine or define, if you haven't done this yet, your ideal client profile, and then be disciplined about sticking to your ICP when you're marketing and selling to prospects. Because if you can do this, this is going to make it a whole lot easier to design your marketing message around, because you're going to be able to communicate how your MSP can meet their needs and meet their goals. And your sales conversations are going to be much stronger because your prospects are going to feel that you actually understand them and their business. Point number 2, improve your discovery and prospect qualification process. And that's really what Bootcamp 1 was all about as part of this series. If you're not asking the right set of questions, it'll make it a little bit more difficult for you to try and uncover what are the real challenges, what are the real struggles that your prospect is experiencing. And this is where you're going to have a difficult time kind of creating that emotion and that sense of urgency that you ideally want as part of your sales process. So again, if you didn't make it to those boot camps, they are available on demand within Enable You. I also have a discovery handout that accompanied that boot camp that kind of outlined all the questions to ask. So if anybody would like a copy of that, just put discovery questions in the question panel and I'll get that sent out to you. Number 3, making sure that we're adding stories into the sales conversations, because this is what is needed to create that buy-in from prospects. Don't just explain how your solution can help, but again, use social proof, use stories, use testimonials from your existing customer base, and use their experiences to talk about why customers chose you. Because again, that's what is more powerful. They don't want to hear what you have to say, they want to hear what your prospects have to say. And then the last point, take charge of your sales process. It's a sales process for a reason. Process, as we all know, series of steps get you from point A to point B. In this case, we're trying to get them from a lead to a signed closed deal in the end. So in your rush to try and win that deal or trying to appear accommodating, don't let your prospect dictate what that path will be from point A to point B. Just creates a lot of confusion for everyone, for the prospect, for the salesperson, for your MSP, if that path from point A to point B is different every single time. All right, so thank you everyone for attending this boot camp today. Absolutely appreciate it. Any questions, any comments, my email is up there on the screen, my QR code, link with me on LinkedIn. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day and have a great rest of the week. Take care.